Hi, this is Tim Von Rieden with cgcookie.com, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be taking a look at creating some Photoshop skin brushes, the use of them, and then in the end I'm going to show you how to export them so you can share them out. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new Photoshop document. I'm going to name it brush, and I'm going to keep the width and the height at the same size and the resolution set at 300. If I click F to full screen, there we go, we have a canvas ready to go. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be using one of Photoshop's preset brushes that they give you to create the 3 custom brushes. And it is the soft round one, and if we look at the brush presets that this one's set up, it has the shape and other dynamics turned on. So on a new layer, if I wanted to, I could just go ahead and dot a bunch of areas, and then that could be my custom brush. But to make it simpler, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the brush preset and turn on scattering. And usually this is set really low, but I turn mine up, and this is because at a very low it doesn't really scatter that much, but the higher you go you can see how the dots spread apart from each other more. So now on this layer, making sure I have black as my color, I'm going to go ahead and create a little splotch of this brush. Something like that. And say this is exactly what I wanted my brush to look like. I would go in and I would go to the Edit drop down and go to Define Brush Preset. Just click OK. Now you can see in the Brush submenu that if I go and create a new layer, if I lay this down, you can see that the brush that we just made, or that splotch that we just laid down, is now the brush. So if we edit some of the settings, so like shape dynamics, so the more pressure you apply, the larger it gets, and other. And then also scattering, but I'm going to turn it much farther down than we did when we actually created the brush. So now you can kind of see we have this nice little texture brush. So on a new layer, I'm going to create 3 circles, and these circles I'm just going to do kind of like a sample for each of the brushes, kind of show like what their use is for drawing the skin. I'm just going to mask that out. So going back to my brush, this first brush is sort of the blending brush, and what I use this one for is this one's not to define anything, it's just to give that nice kind of like a gradient from the light source out. So it's not really supposed to detail or anything. Oh, another thing is on shape dynamics, if I turn up the minimum diameter, you can kind of see right here how it's not at a single point, it gets larger. And I'm going to do that so that when I lay down the brush, I barely have to apply any pressure to get a thicker diameter. I'm just going to create a little sample on this one. So now if I wanted to save this brush out with all these settings on it, I would go click this little arrow next to the current brush you are using and choose this new brush layer. It looks like a new layer icon. When I do that, I can just save it as Skin Brush 1. So I still have the old one saved with none of the presets on, but now this is the one with all the presets on. So now I'm going to go ahead and create the next one. So I'm going to go back to that soft edge brush that I was using before. And I'm going to hide these circles. Okay. So the next one I'm going to make is one that looks like speckles. I'm going to turn that scattering back on. Or never mind, no I'm not, because there will be too many of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to speckle around this area. And this brush will be used for like the highlights, almost to emphasize pores, kind of things like that. And then I'm also going to be using this Speckle Brush to create the third one. So once I'm done with that, since it seems a little too light to me, I'm going to grab that layer and drag it down to the new layer and then just merge them together. So that's a little darker. And then I'm going to go ahead and define this as my brush preset. Okay. Now if I hide this layer, create a new one. Now this one, you can kind of see how if you use a lot of it, it creates a very textured look. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn other dynamics on so that it gives a little bit of a softer to harder look. And then where I want it to really stand out, I can just push down harder on the tablet. So with this one, if I turn back my circles on, and I'm just going to grab a lighter color. So now this one I wouldn't use to define the entire skin, but just to show off what this one does, I'm going to use it on the second one just by its own. So normally I would just go ahead and edit the first one I did with this brush, because this is more of a defining brush. This isn't so much of a standalone brush. So this one's very textured and very rough looking. And I'm going to go ahead and save this one out as well. Skin brush 2. Okay, so now I'm going to create one more using this brush, but I'm going to turn other dynamics off. I'm going to switch back to black. I'm going to go ahead and cover this area, because then this brush will be used for harder areas of the skin, or almost like an undercoat that you can use it as. Okay, so one more time, I'm going to go to Edit, Define Brush Preset, choose OK. And then just like the first one, I'm going to turn on the shape dynamics, other dynamics, and scattering. I'm going to turn this one far down again. And I'm going to change my size, it's a little lower. So now you see how this one has definitely more of an edge to it than the first one. It's a little more texture, grainy looking. So if I turn my circles back on, and on sphere number 3, I'm going to lay down this one. Oop, a little too hard. Oh yeah, sorry, I forgot that I need to turn up the minimum diameter. I was wondering why it was applying so weirdly. So that way I'm not pushing as hard and I'm getting a much larger radius on the brush. So something like that. And I'm going to go ahead and save out this brush as well. Skin brush 3. So now that we have the 3 brushes, I'm going to create one last sphere. And I'm going to be using all 3 on them, on this sphere. Mask it out. Okay, so if I go to this one seems to have the most of the texture on the edge, which I thought it was going to be the 3rd one, but this one has, just by the examples that I did, it just seems like this one's a lot smoother. I'm just going to blend them out, and I'm going to be using, if I hold Alt, you see a little eyedropper, just to pick up the color and lay it down, just to get a nice transition going. If I switch to that 3rd one, kind of smooth it out even more. So create a small rim light on the side, just to emphasize that it's round and it's a sphere. I'm going to go back to my first brush. Kind of break up that smoothness a little bit, because skin is definitely not completely smooth all the way. It has those little pores and wrinkles that you definitely want to detail. And lastly, if I grab that speckle brush and choose a very light peachy pink color, just going to go ahead and highlight where that light's hitting it the most. I'm going to grab that white, turn the other dynamics off, for the final light touch. So grab a little down here as well. And lastly, I'm going to grab that soft round brush that we used from the beginning to create a little drop shadow on the sphere. Oop, come on. Alright, and there you go. So those are the skin brushes that I currently use, and what I like to do at the end is I like to export the brushes if I want to give them to my friends or just to share them out. And to do this, all you do is you go to click this little arrow and scroll down to Preset Manager. And if you select the 3 brushes that you want and choose Save Set, so if I do Skin Pack, and I want it saved to the desktop, click Save. Now if I hide all of this, on my desktop, that's where they're saved to, and they will be saved as the ABR format, which you can just drag and drop into your brush pack in the Photoshop file, or if you go back where you saved them, back to Load Brushes, just click on that and just find where they are, and that's it. So that is how I create my skin brushes and how I export and load them. Thanks for watching.